will control the vertical.
Welcome to Anthologic, the TV anthology podcast. I am your host, Mark. Anthologic is a podcast dedicated to exploring the good, the bad, and the odd of horror, science fiction, and the best of mystery suspense anthology shows and series on TV. Join me as we slip through the cracks of reality to approach the extremes of experience, where we can peruse the stories and art of a sinister fairground of strange and wonderful rides. And now we go on to the show that is the focus of this particular episode. Welcome to this episode of Anthologic with your host Mark. Today we are talking about Night Gallery. This is episode 14 of season 2. And it comprises of 3 stories. And this one first aired on December the 29th, 1971. So just about getting into 1972 after this. Only just. Now, there are 3 stories, one of which is written by Rod Serling. And I'll just go through them in turn, I think. Okay, the first one is called The Different Ones. It's directed by John Meredith Lucas, written by Rod Serling. And probably the most famous person in it is Dana Andrews. Dana Andrews is he's fairly aging in this. He's a male actor. I know him best from, in fact, the only thing I think I know him from is a great movie from the 50s called Night of the Demon, where he plays a skeptical reporter who slowly gets unnerved by a series of events that makes him realise he is indeed cursed, though he doesn't. He's entirely skeptical at first. He's pretty great in this. In this, he's obviously a lot older in this one, and it's about a man who's got a very unhappy son, and we see a boy or a teenager or a young lad sitting in a room with a black bag over his head while children outside are doing nasty rhymes about him and how terrible he looks. Dana Andrews, his father, comes in and sort of shoos the children away, threatens to call the police, and sort of tries to sympathise, but the boy is obviously beside himself and quite angry at how different he is. He's obviously somehow deformed. That's the idea. But we don't see that, and I was wondering while I was watching this, is he actually really alright but just thinks he's deformed? I was just wondering if it's going to be those kind of stories. And then we see the father go to a sort of government place to start talking about his son. And there's like hinting that they're going to kind of kill him or sort of terminate him in some way to put him out of his misery and his father's, but his father won't do that. But they do mention that, we have a contact with this remote sort of planet where we've got quite a good dialogue going with them. They want to do sort of a cultural exchange kind of thing. So they wonder if that's the way. It's a way of him, the lad, getting away from Earth, really, and going somewhere he might not feel so. And he obviously hates his being at home, stuck in. He actually, I think he says something like, I'd rather be in hell than live here. And so they talk about that. There's some sort of cultural exchange. And then we finally see the lad. And yes, he is kind of weirdly deformed, but it's got like a weird... It looks a bit like the face hugger from the Alien stuck to the top of his head, but it's like a pink mass stuck to the top of his head coming over his face, and he's a weird colour. His coloration is odd, look very pasty looking. And he's got other things. It just doesn't look right at all. So we got quite an extended sequence of the father watching the spaceship take off and go through space. The takeoff looks like stock footage from like a Saturn 9, and at one point he's coming towards the asteroid, and that looks like the Apollo mission, one of the Apollo missions coming to the moon. It looks a bit goofy, really. It looks a bit out of place, and also looks a bit over budget for Night Gallery. This kind of things. Yeah, the space stuff looks kind of okay. I mean, it's pre-Star Trek kind of effects. Star Trek did this way better 5 years before, so it's not great. And anyway, he lands on the planet, and they've got like this reception area tunnel, which looks very Earth-like, and there's a lot of chatter. And he lands, and he goes towards the reception, and he sees another person coming towards him, and a young lad like himself, but a young lad who hasn't got his physical deformities, looks quite normal, and he says, he said, "Are you the reception committee?" He goes, No, I'm taking the return journey back. I'm taking the shuttle back." And he says, "What, you going back to Earth?" He goes, "No, I've never been to Earth." And I have to stress this lad looked kind of normal. And he says, and then the lad says something about he doesn't fit in there. And Alfred goes, "Why? What's wrong?" He goes, all right, you don't have to be, you don't have to pretend. I know what I look like." So it's like, what's going on? Basically, the lad thinks he's deformed, even though he looks perfectly normal. And then as our boy moves on, he meets people from this planet who look just like him. And in fact they're girls. And they're saying, "Ooh, aren't you good looking?" and stuff like this. And then he kind of says, "I think I'm going to fit right in here." So he's like a good-looking version of that society. It's basically a sort of little moral fable, or a fable about, surface looks, and in one place someone can be beautiful, and in another place ugly. Yeah, it's all that kind of thing. Yeah, and it's okay. It feels a bit tired, really, but it's okay. It's not bad. That's as much as I can say about it. The second story on this list is very, very much odder than the first, and quite an unusual one. Probably the oddest one that I can remember in the Night Gallery, really, apart from the really goofy ones, like giant rats in from space, or those kinds of ones. But this one's called Tell David, and it's in quote marks, Tell David ... Directed by Jeff Corey, written by Gerald Sanford. Probably the most famous person in this at the time it was made was Sandra Dee. There was an actor in it I recognised called Jared Martin. I've seen him in lots of 70s TV stuff. I remember his name and his look. He's the main actor, and there's a few other actors and actresses too. Basically, a woman breaks down driving, and she encounters this couple who kind of are a bit hippy-dippy, but their house is very futuristic and weird. They smoke cigarettes that aren't a brand she recognises, and they taste odd. They got almost like a video calling device, and you've got to remember this was made in the early 70s. And she tries to ring her husband, but she can't get through, and she doesn't know why. But then we kind of see her back at her house, and she's also interacting with the guy we just met. It seems like it feels like some sort of weird time, someone lost in time story. It feels really much like something like Slaughterhouse-5, where we're seeing multiple dimensions interacting. And eventually the story kind of resolves, and you realise what's happening. She's actually this woman, when she meets this couple, she's actually interacting with her future son, who looks just like his father. That's the confusion. But then when we see her home life with the father, it's an unhappy one. He is annoyed with her, doesn't want to be home with her. She tries to sort of understand what's up with him, but he's obviously not happy. But then it develops on where she keeps going back to the other, or it keeps coming back to the other place. And the man sort of talks about, and they talk about jealousy. And she goes, "No, I can't accept jealousy. You see, my mother, in a jealous rage, killed my father and then killed herself. So that is not a sort of place I want to be." And there's that kind of chat. And eventually you realise she's obviously his mother. And there's a cut on his finger, a scar on his finger. He says he was cut on a birthday, and that transpires in the story too. So we see a young boy cut himself, and he's called David, and things like this. So she realises she's kind of caught in this temporal thing where she will inevitably kill her husband and herself if she doesn't pull herself out of it. She's kind of trying to work it out and desperate with it. But then one night, after all these weird cuts, she just wakes up in bed alone, and she goes in search for her husband, finds him canoodling with the maid, and given she's desperate not to follow the same loop, she immediately gets a gun out of her drawer and shoots him dead. And then there's even a hint while she's in prison. She says, I don't need a lawyer, I won't be around long enough. So she knows she's going to kill herself too. So it's kind of an, fatalistic sort of approach. It's a weird turn, because again, you thought she was going to realise where this was going and pull herself out of it. And honestly, it wasn't quite as bad. I mean, he was canoodling. He was like kissing and making sort of small talk with the maid, really. That's what she came across. So you don't know there was much more than that. It could well have been, but you just don't know. And the interesting thing is, when she wakes up, she does find proof that the cigarette she got, I've got a few to date, which she says is something like 1987, which is kind of funny considering that when I were watching it, and that's way in the past, but obviously when this was made, 1987 sounded like super future, right? There was that. So yeah, it's kind of it's mediocre at best, really. The last one, Lagoda's Heads. This one was directed with some verve, I'd say, by Jenna Schwartz, written by Robert Bloch, stars Patrick Macnee, which is kind of interesting. He wasn't that well known, I guess, but I think he did appear in a lot of, or some American TV shows like Columbo and stuff, so I guess he was a recognised name. And he looks fairly old in this, given it was 72. He looks old already in this. I think he looked a bit better when he came back onto British TV 5 years later in The New Avengers. He looked fitter and trimmer in that than he does here. Also, this stars Tim Matheson. Tim Matheson has got this weird fake moustache, and they're wearing these like pith helmets and safari suits, and it kind of looks a bit goofy. Tim Matheson, for all the world, always he looks like Bruce Willis's younger brother in this. I always thought Tim Matheson looked a lot like Bruce Willis before Bruce Willis lost all his hair. So it's kind of weird to watch this. And they're in Africa, and there's kind of slightly racisty, kind of putting white dialogue into the mouths of. That's just like pidgin English into the mouths of natives in Africa. And basically, they're trying to find a person they know, and they suspect this witch doctor might have killed him. And they kind of go there, and it turns out this witch doctor talks to these shrunken heads. He's got these heads called, and it's Lagoda's Heads. And there's also this youngish sort of African woman who kind of, again, talks in a weird pidgin English, and it's clear that she's American and can talk perfectly good English. And it's kind of weird. It's kind of weird. I have to say, I like the turn from the witch doctor. Brock Peters played the witch doctor, so it was kind of cool. But we find out that he has talked to the heads, and the heads look really goofy. They look like joke shop shrunken heads, which is probably what they are. And it's all coming along, but I have to say, the very final sort of where you realise what's happened, and I don't want to spoil it actually, because I really like the little twist at the end. I thought it was really cool, so I'm not going to talk about it any more in any more detail. But I have to say, I did like the twist at the end. It gave me a little chill in a sort of satisfying way. So in the end, it kind of redeemed itself. I think this particular story, I thought it was kind of fun. Right, I think I will wind it up there. And until next time, but may I ask, is anybody out there?
There's nobody here but us chickens.
We now return control of your television set to you until next week at this same time, when the control voice will take you to